And we just wanted to, this is one of the perks of being a Diamond member, and so this is our thank you to you for just choosing Casa to keep your Bitcoin safe. And one of the value adds of the Diamond plan is that we get to bring industry insights from top industry leaders. And so one of the more, I guess, least understood industries in the Bitcoin space tends to be mining. And so we thought it'd be great to give y'all access to mining experts. And they're gonna briefly introduce themselves in a little bit. But yeah, so we'll do a couple, I'm gonna ask them a couple questions, and then we'll actually move into Q&A. So if you guys have any questions about mining, this is the time to ask real, true experts in the space. So, all right, well, yeah, I guess we can just get started. So my name is Andrew Yang. I work at Casa, and I would love to introduce to you guys our speakers and our panelists today. Would you want to just kind of introduce yourself and a little bit about your Bitcoin mining background?
Sure, yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Econoalchemist, and I am an affiliate with Upstream Data, and I am also a content creator for Bitcoin Magazine. I focus on self-custody, censorship resistance, and mining Bitcoin at home, so I generate a lot of content about those things.
Hi everyone, my name is Fabiano. I'm the head of mining at Galaxy Digital. I focus on mining Bitcoin and also providing financial services to miners.
Hi, my name is Jason Less. I'm CEO of Riot Blockchain. I've been with the company for about 5 years. Riot Blockchain is a Bitcoin mining company, 100% Bitcoin, 100% focused on Bitcoin mining. My job every day, try to figure out how to mine as much Bitcoin as possible.
Awesome. Well, if you guys notice, we have some interesting verticals here. Econoalchemist specializes in mining at home. Amanda has a great perspective around financing for Bitcoin miners, and we have Jason, who is the CEO of a Bitcoin mining company, publicly traded, by the way. I guess my first question to all three of you, and maybe you guys can touch on each of the verticals here. Where do you see the current state of Bitcoin mining today? And maybe we can start off with you, Econoalchemist.
Sure, yeah. You know, coming from the perspective of a home miner, I see it as a way for home miners to accumulate non-KYC Bitcoin and to start dollar cost averaging through their utility bill, essentially, to keep their personal identity not attached to their on-chain activity. And so I see it as a tool for people to become sovereign individuals. And I think it's, you know, the last year and a half, there's just been an explosion in the home mining renaissance. There were a lot of narratives after the 2017 crash where people would tell you it just doesn't make sense to mine at home. You can't compete with the big companies. You can't afford the electricity. You'd be better off just buying at an exchange. And that's not the case anymore. That narrative has been broken because of the efficiency gains, because of the price gains, because of the China ban. And so mining at home makes a lot of sense. And it's not just privacy, but it also makes a lot of economical sense too.
Yeah, I guess one follow-up here is, I think the common perspective of mining at home is that it's really hard, it's really difficult, right? Is it even worth it? Like, can I actually make my money back, right? And so could you kind of speak briefly to that, like, is it possible? Is it profitable to mine at home? And what should I look for?
Yeah, absolutely. It is, there are challenges. You're bringing a piece of industrial grade equipment into your living space. So ASICs are very loud, about 85 decibels. They're very hot, they're about 150 degrees. And if you have a family or roommates, that may be an issue for them. So home miners have come up with incredibly innovative ways to make the noise attenuated and to recycle the heat and cut down on their natural gas usage to heat their homes. There's just incredible innovations that are happening in that space. And not only that, but if you pay the US national average 13 cents per kilowatt hour, you're actually going to be able to accumulate Bitcoin for almost 60% below spot price right now. So it's not just like you're breaking even. If your electricity rate is good enough and your miner efficiency is good enough, you're actually getting a substantial discount on the Bitcoin that you're accumulating, and you're not tying your identity to it. And it's just a win-win all around.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Amanda, where do you see the Bitcoin mining ecosystem today from a financial perspective, financing perspective?
That's a good question. I think there's a misconception that like miners are all in one bucket, right? So there's home miners, there's large miners, and then there's everything in between, both public and private. And what each one of those miners needs from a financial perspective is very, very different. So what I try to do is I, really try to learn about the miner that has a specific like capital need, try to create a product based around that, and then help them scale and grow their company. I think over the next year, and Jason and I talk about this a lot, is treasury management strategies for large miners will be really important. I think over the past year, ASIC-backed financing was huge for miners. With the halving coming up, I think that some of the traditional financiers like myself and others that do that are starting to get a little like, what's going to happen? What do we do? So I think that will kind of slow down a little bit, but I do think that also there will be new entrances coming into the space that are from like traditional finance worlds, and how that changes and switches things up, I think will be really interesting to watch over the next year and a half.
Yeah, so in financing in general, like from what I've heard on the streets is that it's actually hard for miners to get loans and finances and things like that. And is it a challenge, and how have you guys navigated that?
Yeah, I think that the problem is more that miners need a lot of capital up front, right? So like when you're trying to build out a facility, you need to put everything down before you build that facility, right? You have to procure your machines, you have to procure your site, you have to procure the power. And that's really capital intensive. So usually what a miner needs from the get-go is really, really expensive. So then they go out to places and they're like, hey, like I have like 2 megawatts, I'm gonna need $100 million, like can you finance me? And that gets like really weird very quickly. So that's where I get into like the point of there's a lot of different miners with different needs, and we try to create products specific to that miner's need. Miners need a lot of money, and I think that there's been more and more entrances coming into the space, right, to try to help them. But it is still very capital intensive of a business. So like treasury management will be really important, I think, going forward.
Awesome, thank you. All right, Jason, where do you see the Bitcoin mining industry today from a Bitcoin mining company perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, like we've been talking about, there's a whole array of type of Bitcoin miners. So I'm focused on more of the industrial scale. That's what Riot's into. What I see is the Bitcoin mining is this incredibly unique tool for capturing surplus energy. A lot of people probably don't know. There's about like 1/3 of all energy that's generated globally is wasted. There's no one to buy it, it's lost in transmission, it's congested, etc. So because of that, there exists now these large capacity opportunities for capturing that wasted energy in different places. And in grids like ERCOT, where we build out in Texas, we're able to build out pretty substantial capacity. Our site called Windstone, about an hour outside of Austin, we are building to 700 megawatts right now. And this industry has grown so much, because I remember at the beginning of Riot, we had a 12 megawatt facility in Oklahoma City, and I thought that was really big. I was like, wow, look at us with our 12 megawatt facility. And like, here we are, now 4 years later and charging on to 700 megawatts, and we're only one of several companies that are doing pretty substantial builds. I think there's now a lot of capital that is coming into the space and is available to miners. Over the past 12 or 14 months, we've gone from a handful of publicly traded companies to maybe 25 companies, either publicly listed or pending public listings. And with that comes an access to capital that miners are deploying into procuring hash rate and building out these large facilities all over the place. Companies like Riot, Bitfarms, Core Scientific, there's some pretty substantial operations being built. And what I think is really exciting is I think the public is starting to learn more about what Bitcoin mining is, or at least we try to help educate that, because we talk about why the energy use is important to create proof of work, to make a trustless consensus system possible. But I think people are also starting to see the type of job creation that comes around Bitcoin mining. People think about Bitcoin mining as racks and racks of computer or ASICs over and over again, and they think that's all what it is. But there's actually a lot of people that go into making that happen. For example, our Winston site, we employ over 200 people directly there and about 400 contractors. When you go out there, it's not a bunch of empty warehouses, it's hundreds of people building Bitcoin mining operations, and we're seeing that all over the place. So getting back to your original question, when I look at Bitcoin mining right now in my position, I'm seeing the dawn and growth of this industrial age of Bitcoin mining.
Let's go.
Scale operations, and yeah, it's very exciting.
That's awesome. Actually, one follow-up question to you is, I saw this cool news article maybe a few months ago during the winter. There was a huge outage in Texas, but Riot played a role in helping the community. Could you kind of briefly talk about how that happened and why you guys did that?
Yeah, so in open and more free energy markets like ERCOT, we almost operate like a virtual power plant. We deployed capital and took risks to take or pay power for many years out, and as a result, we own that. No one would likely have otherwise purchased that power at that time. Because we're Bitcoin miners, we committed to that capital deployment. So that power is now available to us, and when there are situations in that grid that require more power, we have the ability to curtail our use and make that capacity available. Energy grids are not just a constant amount of energy and a constant amount of buyers. There's fluctuation in generation depending on the different types of generation sources in that grid, the weather that impacts those generation sources, and then there's fluctuating times throughout the day of how much people are using power. So loads like Bitcoin miners have the ability to buy power at any time and then respond to that event. So when we saw that happening, we saw the weather coming in, because a similar event happened in 2021, we could tell there was likely going to be an increased demand in power, so we curtailed our operations ahead of that, and more power was available to the grid, and when that demand crisis subsided, we were back to mining again. And how many other industries can do that? Bitcoin mining is one block at a time, and you don't lose much by shutting off.
That's incredible. And before we get into the future state of Bitcoin mining, one follow-up I had for the whole panel, and we can open it up to everyone here, is there's been some news recently of somebody funding $50 million in terms of PR against Bitcoin and how it's wasteful energy. I wonder if you guys have any quick comments on that. Do you agree with that? Yeah.
Why does Sweden get preferential treatment when it comes to energy over Bitcoin? If the miners are paying for the energy, why should anyone get to try and justify with their moral standards what they're using that energy for? It's not even a waste of energy, but people will try and play it off like that just because they don't understand Bitcoin. So I think the whole attack against Bitcoin with that campaign is it's unjustified. It doesn't make sense. It's going to get played out and be in our rearview mirror soon enough. I don't think it's actually going to do any sort of long-term damage to the Bitcoin network. The greatest network is going to win, and it's definitely not a proof of stake system.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think when we think about who's behind it, it becomes very obvious what their intentions are, right? So if you had a shitcoin and you want to pump your bags, you might be upset about the energy usage of Bitcoin mining too. But Bitcoin mining uses less than 1% of the world's global energy, and to Jason's stat earlier, there's a ton of energy that goes missing. I think that it's just been a narrative that has been super annoying forever, right? Newsweek article saying that Bitcoin was going to eat all of the energy that exists in the world. We're still here, the lights are still on, so we're making it. I think miners and energy, the intersection of those two industries will continue to collide. And just to Jason's point on curtailing and using the grid the way that you should use it is awesome, right? And I think that those are the narratives that we need to push forward. And I know that we have disagreeing opinions on things like the Bitcoin Mining Council, but at least we do have data, right, that shows how much energy is being used for a substantial amount of the network. And that energy usage is being 66% is sustainable in this industry versus others. And so why do we pick on one industry? That just feels it's weird, and how far does that go? So that's usually how I think about it, is why are we only focusing on Bitcoin mining's energy consumption versus focusing on it being this permissionless, open, global monetary system where anybody can use.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Amanda poses a great question. Why does Bitcoin mining get picked on for its energy use? No one looks at how much energy does video gaming use? How much energy does using social media use? That doesn't make them a waste. The transparency of Bitcoin gives people this ammunition to drive criticism. And it's no coincidence this is being funded by, I wouldn't even call it a competitor, but another type of cryptocurrency. Proof of work, like I talked about, because energy is a very important input. This is the one thing in the world you cannot forge, you cannot steal, you cannot copy. It can only be fairly acquired, and that's what drives this incentive system that makes that makes Bitcoin possible. So this is just another attack. The same people launching this attack 2 years ago said, "Oh, Bitcoin, it's a big problem. There's so much mining in China. Like this is going to be a big problem one day." And now here we are 2 years later. "Oh, this is such a big problem that all the mining left China, and now it's not using all the hydroelectric power in China anymore." Like you just can never win with these guys. Listen, it's about education. Amanda and I both in our companies spend a lot of time talking to regulators, talking to lawmakers, talking to the public about what it is Bitcoin is and why it uses energy. And I think it's just about penetrating that message so it gets into people and they understand the energy use has a purpose. It's not some design inefficiency. Like it drives me crazy to listen to a change the code campaign. Oh, why can't a bunch of smart people just figure out how to use less energy? Energy is the whole point. So, I mean, that's just noise to me. Like, I think Bitcoin will overcome this as it has overcome every single attack before.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe last question for everybody on the panel: where do you guys see Bitcoin mining 10 years from now, from each of your verticals? Econo.
That's a good question. From a home miner point of view, I do think that home miners are still going to be mining Bitcoin, and I think the efficiency gains are going to continue, although they'll be more incremental as far as the ASIC technology goes. But what hasn't really skyrocketed, other than the price and the ASIC efficiency, is the cost of the electricity. If you look back the last few years, the cost of electricity has been relatively stable. It's up and to the right, but it's nothing like the price gains or the efficiency gains that we've seen. So I do think long-term, people who are using residential rates for their electricity are going to be able to really get great returns with the amount of efficiency and that they have in the ASICs and what those sats are worth as far as US dollar value goes.
Yeah, one of the things I've kind of have been hoping for is like the commoditization of ASICs, where like it becomes so cheap that anybody can purchase it and buy it. Do you kind of see that happening sometime soon in the 10 years?
I think so. So, a couple of things. There are small companies starting up right now like FutureBit, and they have an Apollo device. And, this speaks to like the decentralization of the network. So if we can have 10 million people that are running miners in their home, then that's a lot harder to enforce a blacklist of certain Bitcoin transactions. Whereas if all the mining power is concentrated with just a few large mining corporations, it's
No
easier
shade. No
to get a regulatory stranglehold around them. And what Jack is doing with Block, he's trying to do it all open source, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more open source innovation, and I hope that it drives a demand from the market going forward that makes it so they want their mining hardware open source. Because right now we're just trusting Bitmain and MicroBT with closed source hardware. We don't know what's going on in there. So I hope that when Jack comes out with his product, is his Bitcoin mining system with Block, that it opens up a whole nother section of the market that's more accessible to home miners.
Thanks. Amanda, how about you?
So 10 years in Bitcoin mining is a very long time. So just want to preface with that. I think that, like, even if we think back to last year, everything changed with the China ban, right? Like, we didn't expect that coming. So predictions can become difficult, but I do think that over time, that there'll be a lot of M&A coming up over the next couple of years in mining. I think it's going to naturally happen because you have smaller groups that are trying to do all the things that Jason has been successful at, and they might have some things to offer, but they can partner with other people that have other things to offer. So I think M&A will be something that will continue. I think the trend that we had last year, miners going public, is probably going to slow down a little. Just because I think that it's really difficult to become a public miner. So and to sustain being a public miner. So I think that might slow down. And I do, you know, the like Bitcoin holder in me like hopes that home mining continues. I think that it's really cool. So I hope that that is something that continues to scale and grow.
Awesome, thank you. Jason.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, obviously I run a large Bitcoin mining company, but I completely agree that home mining is going to continue to be around, and that's part of the decentralization and thus security of the Bitcoin network that makes our business more secure. I mean, you're right. If mining was, you know, just a handful of large companies, that introduces this type of risk, but the fact that it is so distributed, and I think that will continue. I think Bitcoin mining will continue to be a tool to capture surplus energy, even if for a small portion of the day, wherever that inefficiency is found, a home, small business, medium business, large business, or a huge portion of the grid. So I think Bitcoin mining